Just a quick note before we jump into this episode, there might be a few swear words, so if you've got little ones around, it might not be the episode to listen to whilst they're there, but I highly recommend listening to this one. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Freelance Teabreak, the short and sweet podcast you can enjoy whilst you're having a cuppa. I have my cup up, but I also have a guest today, Maggie Patterson. Now, if the name doesn't immediately ring a bell, I have a feeling on Instagram her handle might, which is BS Free Business. I know a lot of my friends follow Maggie because I had a quick look on Instagram today and we've got like 70 mutuals on Instagram alone. And when I mentioned to Talia in my group, she had already mentioned previously that she loves Maggie's podcast. So when I told her that Maggie was coming on, she's proper fangirl. She loves it. Even she does there's a phrase in one of Maggie's podcasts, which is shit I saw on the internet. And that even comes to mind to her all the time when she's seeing things. So Maggie has got a wonderful way of weaving herself into our brains when we're coming and thinking about business. So the reason we got Maggie on is to talk a little bit about running a business, running a solo business, but also all the pressure that there is around scaling and things like that. So before we get into all of that, let's get Maggie to introduce herself. So Maggie, welcome to the podcast. I'd love to know a little bit more about how you would describe yourself.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you for having me, Emma. I'm excited to be here because I love to talk to freelancers because I've been there. I started off my freelance journey 20 plus years ago. I had a little baby and I didn't want to go back to work. And I actually packed my office when I went on my maternity leave and never came back. And it worked out really well. I'm glad to report because I didn't really have a plan. I just kind of quit my job and I was like, oh, what have I done? So, from there, it's taken lots of twists and turns. I was a very classic freelancer doing, I came out of the agency world. I did a lot of freelance work for other agencies. And then eventually I, found the online business world. I started adding to my team. Since then, I, scaled up a small content marketing agency, and I'm kind of in the process of descaling said agency. And founded BS Free Business because I wanted to help, micro businesses, whether it be a solo business owner or someone with, a super small team, get business counseling and guidance and advice in a way that is actually going to work for them. Because I'm sure we'll touch on this even more, but the reality is entrepreneurship is seen as like, hey, this is a Shark Tank or Dragon's Den type situation versus, the reality that most people are one-person businesses and most business advice is not meant for one-person businesses.
No, I agree completely. I think it's something you touched. You have several podcasts, which I think we should probably mention because there's so many really good things to hear from all of your different podcasts. But I know you've touched on it across all of them about some of the messages that were given as freelancers. And I guess my first question is, so I know you just brought out a brilliant book called Staying Solo. What was it that made you think, do you know what, I really need to write a book about this?
So, we're 9 years into BS Free Business. And what was really interesting for me is that through my work with more consumer advocacy with my Duke podcast, and then working hands-on with people, I really came to realize that deficit in business knowledge. It's very much geared towards you're going to create this startup or you're going to run the type of business that's like a brick and mortar with 10 employees. And so many of my clients, like probably 80% of my clients, are these one-person solo service businesses. And they really get stuck on, am I doing this right? Should I be doing X, Y, or Z? And also feeling like I'm not even a real business because people are like, oh, you just work from home. You do your like cute freelancing thing. And they feel really left out. They feel really marginalized. And a lot of them end up feeling like they have to stop doing services. A lot of them end up feeling like I have to hire because that's the only way for me to make more money or to grow. And for me, that was something that just kept coming up in my work over and over and over again. And then I created a framework for my solo service business owners. And eventually I was actually with two of my business friends, and they looked at me in a pool in California and said, Maggie, what are you doing? You literally have a book. Like, you have it. Why are you writing it? So fast forward 18 plus months, and I do actually have a physical book.
It is a beautiful book as well, actually. I was going through the intro, and actually one of the things I think really stood out is you mentioned about particular women end up freelancing, whether it's because we become carers for others or the traditional workplace doesn't fit us, but then also there's this backlash of women with businesses being almost seen as hobby businesses.
Yes.
And I wonder if that is part of what reason why we push this idea of scaling up, because it's like, you need to take this seriously. And you could have been actually doing really well, enjoying your freelance business, servicing your clients. But then there's this push, like, you can't be seen as a hobby business or anything like that when you weren't even a business. Or, I'm sure you've had it in the past where someone said, well, how's your little business going? And that sort of thing. And I think there's probably it does seem like sometimes a lot of this pressure to scale is focused on women in particular.
It is very much focused on women because there is no recognition of the realities that so many people in marginalized groups, which includes women, which includes people with mental health challenges or disabilities, from the LGBTQIA community, for women of color. Like, the reality is that we have other realities going on, whether that be limited capacity or caregiving or something else. And that doesn't mean we're any less capable, but the reality is we have other things to be doing with our lives, whether, we're rearing children or caring for elderly parents, or I don't really care what it is, frankly. We are building businesses to fit into our lives. And then the message is, that's not good enough. Even though so many solo service business owners are able to do all those things and honestly are making more money than they would have in their actual, career, whatever that was. I know that was the case for me. And I was like, I don't even work full time and I make more than my past salary. Like, why are we having this conversation? And I mean, I'm bold enough to basically be like, are you for real? But I always think of this story one of my clients told me. She was at a networking event and someone said, well, you don't have a real business until you have employees.
Wow.
And in the US, 80% of businesses are one-person businesses. This is the majority, yet we're made to think this is the minority. And I'm tired of that conversation. I feel like that for that 80% of people, which so many of which are service business owners, we need to be able to look at our businesses differently and have confidence that this is the right path for us and not feel compelled or cajoled to go off that path.
What do you think are some other things that are pressurizing people to feel like they have to? Because that's bonkers to me that so many people don't perceive a one-person business. Because you would actually, I don't think it's even necessarily just a one-person business. Because if you're a hairdresser, like an independent hairdresser, you would be considered to have a business. Or if you're a plumber or a builder, whereas it's almost like the creative industry, you have to scale to be taken seriously, I guess.
Yes. And a lot of this is because these are invisible businesses in a lot of ways. Like, people are at home, or going to a co-working space. People don't really see that. You don't need a hairdressing chair. You're not a plumber. You're not running around doing all these things. And people just assume that that's different. Now, I do think that has started to change. And I do touch on this in the book, is I really notice a difference after starting with the pandemic, when people started working from home. They were like, oh, I kind of see how this works now. So there is a bit of a shift there, a recognition that, these are shockingly real businesses. But so much of that pressure comes from really, if I had to distill it down, two forces. Number one is the greater cultural celebration and narrative around entrepreneurship. You see entrepreneurship as startups and going on Dragon's Den and doing those types of things, when the reality is very, very different. And then the other side of it is very much intensified in the online space with the relentless message of you need to grow, you need to scale, you need a course, you need a team that is driven by people who are trying to sell you things. So they are literally creating a problem that you do not have and trying to get you to buy their course, their mastermind, their coaching, whatever it is. And that is in service of them, but it's not necessarily in service of you. And I do want to say, like, if you're someone who's like, hey, great, I want to run a micro agency, or I do want to have a part-time assistant, there is nothing wrong with that, but please make sure it is a choice you are intentionally making and not something you're doing for the ego or the vanity of it, or because you think you should or have to.
100%. I mean, as a disclaimer, I do have a couple of people that help me. Over here in the UK, we've got something called Access to Work, which is where it's a government fund that helps those with disabilities. And as a neurodivergent person with ADHD, that applies to me. So I have someone that helps me with things like that my ADHD struggles with. So things like spotting problems or double checking my work and staying on track. Now, that I think there's a big difference between bringing on people who help you with the stuff that you can't do yourself very well, and that chasing that 6-figure, 7-figure pressure. Because I think that, like, I've had people who come to me and said, I want to really earn 6 figures. And I'll say, okay, great, why? And they don't know why. And I'll say, okay, well, what are you going to spend that on? I don't know. I just need to achieve that 6-figure status. And it's sometimes not even about the money. It's just that Instagrammable, I'm a 6-figure business, or I retired my husband. These are not necessarily things that people want. They're just things that they're told they need.
Yeah, it's like a checkbox. And the 6-figure, 7-figure thing cracks me up because, number one, is that in pounds? Is that in Canadian dollars? I can tell you, because I just went to the UK. If it's in Canadian dollars, it's way less than in pounds. So, that's the first thing, is like, we're throwing out these random metrics that are not really, like, there's no context in those. And then the other part of it that just makes me laugh is, if you have to get to 6 figures, but you had to hire 2 people, like 2 full-time people to do that, you're not actually more profitable. Some of the most profitable business owners I know are solo business owners making really great livings. And the other thing I want to point out, I think is really important, is when I talk about a solo business, and you touched on this, it doesn't mean you're doing this alone. It means you don't have employees. It means you don't have full-time team members with you. You're not responsible for someone's payroll. But it's really important to remember that just because you are a team of one, it doesn't mean you can't get help. And that might be help in terms of you have a consultant you work with, a coach, a mentor. It might be skills. It might be what you have, Emma. It might be you're making sure that you have meal prep delivered to your house. I don't care what the support is. It's you figuring out for you, with your capacity, with your needs, the way your life is, where are you getting the support you actually need, not just the support that is deemed glamorous or the thing to do on the internet.
100%. So how can we change that message that scaling up is I suppose it's a bit like, I talk to a lot of graduates, and when they come out of university, they're almost taught that the only ways to come, especially if you're like a business degree, I think, is start your own brick and mortar business or join a graduate program. And I feel like at the moment, there's just this, have your own solo business and scale up. But if you have a solo business, you can't be highly profitable or anything like that. And I think you touched on that some of the most profitable people you know are actually the solo businesses. But what kind of message do you think there should be instead?
I really want to change the conversation away from scale to how do we create a business that is sustainable in terms of how it's paying our salary and how it's adding to your life. So many people are doing things in their business, chasing scale that they actually hate and that are not suitable for them. And, I work with a lot of neurodivergent business owners. They'll be trying to do things that, they come to me and they're like, oh, I'm doing this, doing this. And I'm like, why? And it's because they've been taught like that's how you have to grow. And the reality is each one of us has a point at which, this is a comfortable spot for us. Chasing more revenue for the sake of more revenue actually is not helpful. Understanding what your numbers are, understanding for you, how much money do I need to bring in a month personally into my life, as well as, what's a comfortable number for me to be making? And what I find when I sit down and like actually talk to people about these numbers is it's not necessarily six figures. It's very different for each person. And that needs to be considered. And what people often discover is, hey, I can do this in a really sustainable, a really simple way that lets me have a life. And I don't have to do any of this stuff that I'm being told or pressured to do on the internet, because success is something we should be defining, not having these external measures of success imposed on us.
Completely. I think money, if I did funny, is that you was going over you. When I told her about this podcast, she talks about money quite a lot as a money coach. And I know for a lot of people, it's understanding money is a much bigger problem than earning more. And, as you touched on with the profit and that side of things as well, it is, a lot of people have no idea what they need to be earning. What lifestyle they want and how much that will cost. And to just sit down and do that as an exercise is really powerful. I have a feeling listeners listening to this will be going, but how can I grow my income without scaling? And I have a feeling you might have a few tips around that.
Yes. So we basically get presented these two paths to growing income, right? Number one, I'm going to hire people because that's the way I'm going to leverage that. I'm going to, leverage their labor and make more money. Or I'm going to add a course, a program. And again, if you want to do that, great. It's not an easy path. It is a different type of business entirely, and nobody acknowledges that. But what if you could just continue as a solo service business owner and grow your income in a way that allows you to do what you need to do? And sometimes this is going to sound really simplistic, but raising your rates, restructuring packages, pursuing a different audience. And one of my favorite ones that I see like really layering on this like really nice 10, 20, 25% of income for my clients is starting to charge for the strategy work you do, because so many freelancers, so many solo service business owners are doing work that is highly strategic for their clients, and they're burying it in tactical pricing, and it's not really acknowledged. I know I did this for a long time, and like something as simple as like packaging up your strategy offers, starting to sell those and charging appropriately for those can make a major difference in how much money is coming in an average month.
I love how those are all service-based tips as well, because I feel like we've been in a bubble of being told you need courses, you need passive income. And definitely I've noticed in the last 2 months, probably the last 6 months, but more intensely in the last 2 months, a lot of people are really struggling to sell courses now or anything, like, partly because of ChatGPT, because we can now find all that information, but that also means socials are absolutely flooded with it. So we're also seeing on socials storytelling doing better than information and value. But with the services side, a lot of people are going back to the services because they either don't want to DIY it and they don't have the time or the energy and they want to go to an expert who can do it, or they're just overwhelmed by everything. So I think I feel like people almost turn their nose up sometimes about doing, like, that you want to come away from one-to-one and move to one-to-many, but I think there's a real shift at the moment towards getting more value back on the one-to-one and how important that is.
I love that you brought this up, Emma, because I have noticed the same thing. And here's what's really interesting. I have noticed in the last probably 3 months, a lot of programs, like, we'll call them group programs, courses, whatever they might be. They're adding in bonuses that are one-to-one. So, they're really doing things in a way that they don't traditionally do one-to-one. And these are the same people who look down on one-to-one service providers, who, treat services as a stepping stone when services are not a stepping stone. The majority of businesses in the world are service businesses. And we need to recognize that when you go to do a group program, when you go to do a course, when you go to start selling ebooks, that is a different business model that is very capital intensive, requires a lot of marketing and sales skills, requires you often to hire designers and people to do development work and all these things. And maybe you're going to make more income, but you're also going to spend a lot more. And I did an exercise a couple of years ago, and I talked about it on my podcast, Staying Solo, where I added up the costs of running my content marketing agency versus what it costs to run a BS-free business in an average month just with tools. And it is so much more. So you're carrying more overhead to make more money. And what people often find out, even if they're successful, is it's a really hard path to get that to a point where you are able to actually, jump your income up. So there are so many other ways to do this that are much simpler, much less capital intensive, and are not going to burn you out.
So that touches nicely on the next question I was going to ask you, which is how do we stay solo without burning out? Because I think people often mistakenly think, okay, if I'm going to do it myself, I do have to do all the hours. And I think some of the tips you gave there about like upping your rates and things like that are really good tips. So do you have any other suggestions about avoiding burnout when you're working solo?
Yeah. So when we look at what this term burnout gets thrown around the internet, and it's a chronic persistent loss of meaning in your work. And it happens for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it happens because we are over our capacity. You and I both have ADHD. We are going to go through periods when we cannot function at the same level we were in another period. And we perhaps have not built the business to support us appropriately. So really understanding for you what kind of supports you need and what kind of parameters are you working with. And I've started talking to my clients about this thing. This is not in the book. This is newer, but, looking at it from the perspective of that thing you want to do in your business, like, hey, I'm going to work. And this is the one I see a lot of service business owners do, overworking. They're like, I'm going to make more money, so I'm just going to work more. Well, that actually is not going to pass what I would call the real life test. And the real life test being like, does this work for your life? Can you sustain this in your life? Whether that be your emotions, your energy, your schedule, your ongoing personal needs. If it does not fit your life, it should not be fitting your business either, because we think it's, a sacrifice. But the reality is we can only sacrifice. And when we continuously override what we need as humans and what we need in our personal life, what happens? We end up burnt out. And often this is where service business owners completely crumble, they disappear. And then what happens is they have to come back and rebuild the business. So I want to make sure that if you're going to stay solo, you're actually going to do it in a way that is going to let you have a very boring, very peaceful, very profitable business, not one that is on this cycle of constantly overworking and having to recover.
I love that you call it like a boring business, because I think it's contentment, isn't it? But having a business that you're content with, and people both find that boring and not flashy, and you're not getting all the PR awards or anything like that. But actually, contentment is really underrated.
Yeah, and I feel like I wrote this in an essay I wrote when I was talking about boring businesses. So many people start businesses because of so many other reasons, but they get trapped, addicted to the dopamine hit of doing the new thing and like the work, and they're really looking for the work to fill such a big bucket for them. And we have to go, like, literally say to my clients all the time, please go find some hobbies. Like, no, you don't need to create a new thing. No, you don't need a new client. You need to raise your rates and go learn how to cross stitch or something, or kayak. Like, you need to stop it. And this is such a hard thing for a lot of people. We get really excited. We really like what we do. And then what happens is we literally drive ourselves into the ground under the guise of, oh, it's fun. It's exciting. Let it be boring. It can still bring you joy and contentment. And then go put that energy into something else. Because at the end of the day, as much as your clients love you, they're not going to pay you to sit around when you have to recover.
So basically, treat your business like a job that you have to clock off from.
Yeah, because here's the thing that nobody wants to acknowledge. Even if we love our businesses, if everyone was independently wealthy, like had endless buckets of money and could buy a yacht, not that they would they still be doing this? I have questions. And I always say to my clients, I always say to my friends, like, if you have to work, make this the best possible situation for yourself. Because the majority of us do have to work. So how do we work in a way that actually works for us and is going to let us have the life we want and is actually going to be sustainable, not for months, but like years and decades?
I have to be honest, this would be one of the biggest motivators, the reasons why I would not want to build an employed team. Like, the people that I work with who are kind of on my team, I feel like it's collaborative. Like, we're all kind of peers working together, and they bring their skill set, but it doesn't feel like having an employee. Whereas having employees would give me so much anxiety. I'd be so worried all the time, and I hate managing people. I don't have to do that because I'm working with people who are experts in their field. And I feel like it'd be so much more stressful to build a team like that, like in a sort of a scaling up way.
I love that you hit on the fact that you don't want to manage people, and that's probably not a good choice for you, because what I see happening is people get to a point of, they're really growing, they end up hiring, they take on an employee, and then there's this like surprise. Oh, you're a leader now, whether you want to be or not. You're responsible for this person's full-time income. And hiring people should not be entered into lightly. Like, I do have a full-time employee who happens to be my sister. And that has worked out really, really well. But, I remember the first 2 weeks of the pandemic when I lost a ton of clients, corporate clients, being like, oh boy, what have I done? And it's all worked out, but like, there is a level of responsibility and leadership that goes into hiring people. And it's not this just hire flippant advice that we get on the internet.
No, it's definitely not. It's not that glamorous thing.
No, it's not. I mean, I work with people, micro agency owners that have full-time employees, and like, there's a whole other set of challenges that go with that. And for some of them, it's probably not worth it. I do see people that leave. I do see people that go back to being solo. And I think you have to have the right temperament and, be ready to do that work, which is not fast or easy, contrary to popular belief.
So, with your book, what's one thing that you would love people to take away from it or action after they've read it?
I would love people to recognize that staying solo is a valid path, that you don't have to abandon services, and that as you are taking in business guidance, whether that be a coach, a consultant, reading my book, that you have to do what is going to work best for you. And recognizing that for some of you, that might be raising your prices. And for others of you, that might be getting some boundaries in place. So it's not a one size fits all. And one of the things I do say early in the book is like, this is meant to be a guidebook. So skip around, screw the rules. You get to do this your way. And I wish more people had that spirit in their business, because people start a business with that. But what it gets slowly kind of removed as we comply into these rules of the online business world. And I really want people to recognize like, hey, this is my business. I have choices. I have agency. And I'm going to do this in a way that works for me. And maybe that means I'm going to build something that's very sustainable and very boring and not super sexy. But guess what? My nervous system is totally great and my bank account is doing fine.
Yes. Yeah, years ago now, and I must read it actually, I did in my Facebook group, I did a poll and asked people why they were self-employed or why they were freelance. And money wasn't even in the top three. Like, it's important, obviously, because you can't pay the mortgage company without it. But the things that were most important were things like flexibility and control. And those are things I think people need to remember that, why are you doing this? Are you doing it just to make money? In which case you could get a job and just make lots of money doing the job and fine. But if you're doing it for things like flexibility and control, are you making sure you're building that into your life? And as a solo business owner, that's the ultimate control, really, isn't it?
It really is. And that research holds up. Like, there is a part in the book where there was a survey done by state across the US, and in very few situations was money. It was always freedom, flexibility, control, all the things you just cited. So how do we get back to that? And I'm not going to romanticize it. Like you said, everyone is working for a reason and needs to bring in a certain amount of money, but like, get a grip on that number and know what that actually is so that you can have the freedom and flexibility that you actually started the business for. Because I see so many people giving that up, or, frankly, being fully delusional about what they actually need to do in their business to reach a point where the business is actually going to pay the bills and everything else. Like, there is work involved, I'm not going to lie, but it doesn't have to be the kind of work that works you into the ground.
Love it. So, if people are listening and they're like, okay, I need more Maggie in my life, where can they find you online?
Okay, so I am all the places. And number one place is my website, bsfreebusiness.com. And if you go to bsfreebusiness.com/book, you'll find my book, Staying Solo. I also host many podcasts. Everyone buckle up. I host the Staying Solo podcast, which is all the places you can, you find podcasts. I also host a smaller podcast called Confessions of a Micro Agency Owner. So if you're really thinking about leadership, I think that's a really great place to start. And I am the co-host of a podcast called Duped, which is the one Talia was giving props to, which is a consumer advocacy podcast. And if you've ever wondered, is it just me looking at things on the internet, or you're really thinking like, why do they use this sales tactic? We unpack those tactics and really get into like what to watch for and perhaps what to do instead. And that one is all the places on the internet as well.
All your podcasts are excellent, but Duped, the one that comes up most often when we're having like membership calls with my members, it just comes up quite often because, God, did you see about that? And things like your takedown of LLMs and a certain celebrity endorsement and things like that. Those are the kind of conversations that I think people need to have, because we see so much especially on Instagram, both these kind of picture perfect businesses, and I think a lot of that needs to be called out, and I love that you're doing that. And I think definitely give Maggie a follow on, in particular in Instagram and Threads. I think you're really, really good at highlighting and calling things out. I think it's a great service.
And I just want to make everyone clear too, I don't call them out like person did XYZ. I'm analyzing the tactic and then getting into things, because I want everyone to be able to look at that and go, you know what? I just saw that, not for me. What is that? Nope. To recognize that pattern over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I think especially anyone that's new into the industry, it's really easy to get swept up in that. So I think it's a really responsible thing to be like, no, you don't actually have to do that, or no, not everybody is doing that, or find what's right for you. So thank you so much for coming on, Maggie. It was really, really interesting chat, and I'm working through your book. I'm not very fast reading, I'm afraid, but I am really enjoying it. I really recommend anyone else have a read of it as well, especially if you're a freelancer who feels like they have kind of drifted down the river a little bit of doing what everyone tells you to do, and you want to work out what you actually want. I think it's a fantastic book.
Thank you so much, Emma. I appreciate you having me on the podcast, and I'm actually reading the book, because you write a book and then you're like, who's going to read it? I don't know. Let's see.
Oh, yeah, I did. No, I definitely. Oh, and I know on a recent episode of I can't remember which one I think it was the Staying Solo podcast where you were talking about your favorite books for this season.
Yes, I did that for just a fun summer wrap up because I'm an avid reader, and one thing that my clients and all my friends look forward to is at the end of the year I always do this massive book wrap up, but I decided to bring that energy to the podcast.
I loved it. I added a few things, and I just downloaded the latest Taylor Reid Jenkins as a result of that.
I just finished it. I read it this weekend. It was so good.
We definitely have a lot of readers in the groups, in the followership of this podcast, so I think they might go enjoy that as well. Thank you very much, Maggie, and that's it for another week, everybody. Have a wonderful freedom.